So, you've been playing Epic 7 for a good while now, but all your knowledge happens to be surface level knowledge. That's because by the time you finished episode 2, you forgot everything that happened in episode 1, and by the time you started episode 3, you forgot what happened in episode 2, and it's far too early to guess. But by the end of episode 4, you'll likely have forgotten everything that happened in episode 3. While sure, certain characters might stand out more than most. Hell, people simp for Crow, Arby, Strays, Violet, Luluka. Hell, there's a Chloe cult out there. Certain characters will stand out, and that's a fact. But what about the lore? The game is so huge. It is big. The lore is actually impressive, but none of it is touched on. So anyways, while the average player might get distracted from all the Abyss, Labyrinth, Hall of Trials, and Wyvern grinding, you can rely on me to maybe refresh your memories and teach you new things about the lore that you might have missed on. So, this is the goddess that everyone talks about, Diche, and this is her enemy and brother, Iliros. Ever since Diche left the Celestial War, Iliros has been keen on bringing her back. Now Diche made the heir of the Covenant, Ras El Claire. Meanwhile, Iliros made the Archdemon. You probably can't tell the difference between the two. Since both Ras and the Archdemon have similar backgrounds, it's safe to assume that they both possess equal powers. So let's talk about why Diche left the Celestial War. Ever since the death of Orbis, the god of nature, Diche was swallowed in grief and decided to build a world using his corpse. Wow, Diche. Very generous of you. Diche also scores 10 out of 10 in creativity, naming this new creative world Orbis. Huh. I wonder where that name came from. Iliros, on the other hand, didn't understand Diche's fixation with the land of Orbis. He sent the Archdemon to destroy the land of Orbis. That way, Diche would come back to the Celestial War. However, Diche created Ras for that specific reason. Diche wanted to preserve Orbis's name, going as far as resetting the entire world every time the Archdemon came even close to destroying it. However, all of this information is covered in the Archdemon War. So I'm gonna go into why Orbis, or how Orbis functions. How did Diche make Orbis's corpse work? How does the world of Orbis work? So let's talk about the Spirit Lords. Much like Ras, the Spirit Lords are the creation of Diche. Their role is to serve as foundation for the world of Orbis. Their role is to maintain and preserve order in the world, as evident with Strays, dubbed the God Killer. Messing with one Spirit Lord is enough to disrupt the entire world, causing it to fall into ruin. We'll get into the Spirit Lord's contribution a little later. For now, let's talk about the Archdemon. On a similar thinking to the Spirit Lords, the Archdemon or Iliros created the Acotals, which are underlings of the Archdemon, possessing great strengths and powers. My assumption is a Spirit Lord at full strength is equal to an Acotal at full strength. Since the Spirit Lords are too occupied with keeping the world in order, the goddess Diche created the Guardians, tasked specifically to combat the Archdemon. The Guardians are also tasked to find a worthy individual, granting them superhuman powers to specifically fight the Archdemon. In this case, we call them the heirs. Through the intro of the game, we see that Ruel and Judge Kisei were both selected to become heirs. Unfortunately, we do not see the other heirs. They might be dead, or they might have been occupied with something else. Unfortunately, we also witness their deaths. Right before the Archdemon could kill Ross, DJ reset the entire world. Ross ended up surviving, but unfortunately, the dead people remain dead. However, not all hope is lost, as Guardians can find the new individuals and give them the title of heir. In our case, Ross remains as the heir of the Covenant. Zeon, known as Ruel's guardian, elects Izeria. Crom Cruz, known as Judge Kisei's guardian, ends up picking Ludwig or Ludwig, whichever you want to say. Kazran, the guardian of time, ends up selecting Yuna, a human from another world. And the last heir needs no introduction.
Victory is right in front of us!
Our other heir is Craw, and his guardian is Siegfried. A frickin' horse. I honestly don't know what they were thinking, but that design is pretty badass. Anyways, the next guardian is Heinen. Vildred killed him. Do you want to know why I know his name is Heinen? I'll get into that later. Let's talk about the heir's opponents. Here we have Nilgal, a frickin' poisonous whatever he is. Wait. Am I reading this right? Is he an acolyte? What the hell? So we have the king of acolytes, Charon. We have the poster girl of the game, Tenebria. Nilgal just seems out of place for me, which kind of makes sense since he was summoned by sacrificing furries. Anyways, I want to bring your attention to the artifact Shepherd of the Hollow. To those fools who cannot be redeemed, kneel down, despair, and obey. Those who fell to his sword soon lost themselves and rose up as Dustwalkers. I wonder what does Dustwalker mean? Dustwalker Epic 7. Images. So it seems like every time Charon goes on a killing spree, he adds more minions to the Archdemon's forces, which kind of explains the end of Eulogy for a Saint. Moving on to Tenebria's artifact, Crimson Moon of Nightmare. It's hard to even venture a guess as to when this red marble was created. This marble creates the illusion that an immense full moon has risen in the sky, bringing forth the deep madness hidden within any who see it and trapping them in a never-ending hallucination. So Charon's contribution is he kills people, revives them as undead. Meanwhile, Tenebria, using the power of her hallucinations, she tricks people into following the Archdemon. Or worse yet, they simply just fight for the sake of Archdemon without any will of their own. Anyways, if you open Salayu Forest and look towards the edge, you might notice that something looks wrong, something looks amiss. Anyways, if you follow that line to, let's say, the Salayu Swamp, you notice that the pattern continues. And if you follow that, you end up in the Farsh Frontier. Something to note about this is that DJ's resetting abilities are not perfect. Some remains of the old Archdemon wars will always remain as permanent injuries. And that crack in the world, it's a gateway where other gods or other enemies can cross through. Is it a chaos gate? No one knows. But it is a crack in the world so that is the name we will go by. Unfortunately, the crack in the world also invites other creatures that aren't necessarily followers of the Archdemon, but are definitely no allies of Orbis. Now, I did mention the Chaos Gates, so I might as well get into them. The Phantom CIC, which is a corporation made specifically to observe and study the Chaos Gates. Through their adventures and valiant research, they have found creatures that defy all logic of the world. Hence their name, the Unknown. Unlike the creatures that appeared from cracks in the world, the Unknown are extremely aggressive. They are not neutral creatures. They simply seek destruction and malice. That is all there is to them. Moving on to Tyrannor, we find some suspicious activity going on behind the scenes. The king of Tyrannor was producing homunculus. His main objective was to revive his wife, which later on is revealed to be Kisei. Now the current prince of Tyrannor, with the help of Krau, ends up busting up this factory. They execute the king of Tyrannor because he went mad. As all things, the story doesn't end there. As soon as Friedrich became the king of Tyrannor, through some odd intervention, he changed his ways. Be it through Cheiron or Tenebria, he started becoming mad himself, continuing the operations of the homunculus factory, this time to house the vessel of the Archdemon. That's not to say that the homunculus were the only creations of this factory, but they were definitely the main aim. The factory also created Mercedes, which Krau, before he was exiled, managed to steal her because she was the main candidate to house the Archdemon. Born out of the energy of the Archdemon Angraf, they possess his powers of pure destruction, bringing back painful memories of the previous Archdemon war. Angra Shade is a very, very interesting topic for me because at the start of the video I mentioned that Ross and Angraf should technically be equal in power. However, you may recall that the Yen somehow managed to seal the Archdemon and split him into pieces, apparently. Vildred's role in this story was to collect the Archdemon's might and pour its power into the vessel of the Archdemon. Now, unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan. But before we get into that, let's continue about the Angra Shade. Seeing them is a way to confirm that the Archdemon Angraf isn't complete per se. These shades started to appear after Angraf was split into pieces. They are, by definition, his feces, whatever remains. Thanks to Iseria being the only one who actually managed to protect her Archdemon's might, Ross found out that he can convert the Archdemon's power into his own power. That is mainly because Dice and Iliros are siblings, therefore their rules, their laws are the exact same. So what does this mean for us? Well, thanks to the Angraf shades, we are able to deduce that the Archdemon Angraf, is not complete. And after the events that occurred in the Forest of Elves, we saw that Ross converted the Archdemon's might into his own powers, which means to imply that the Archdemon in no way, shape or form is able to use his full powers. And at the start of the video, I said that theoretically, Ross and the Archdemon should be equal. Now, Mercedes being a homunculus, she's only a vessel, but she was selected by the last spellbook. So, if the Archdemon's might, Mercedes, and Ross were equal level, that must mean that Mercedes had to have housed immense power. However, we can see that is not the case. Ross wins and ends up subduing the Archdemon, labeling Ross the champion this time. Let's go back a few steps and talk about the Spirit Lord's contribution. Although they are not talked about much, they still do contribute a lot into the story. They literally share their powers to the people of Britannia, or rather I should say, the people of Orbis. Simply put, using the Spirit Lord's power makes you an automatic ally of the world. Hence, the Archdemon will always fight or try to kill anyone who uses the Spirit Lord's power. Let's show off some characters that mention the Spirit Lords.
Muscles a bit. Radiant Spirit, Destina. In the name of Nixid. In Sylvana's name, Malicus. I will show you the power of Nixid.
Nice. Nixid. Descend.
Now obviously speaking, not every character is gonna shout the name of their representative Spirit Lord. However, one thing to note is, our running theory is that every character that uses a Spirit Lord's power must have at some point acquired a rune. That would explain the awakening that you perform in order to enhance a character's skills. After all, what are runes? They are simply particles of power from the Spirit Lords, and challenging a Spirit Altar is like a test to determine whether you are worthy of your powers. That would explain why Silk's arrow just makes a tornado, or Dominial being able to drop a spike of ice from thin air, or Iseria simply floating. Like, how do her 6 swords float? That can't be something normal. Another way to get powers is to simply worship Diche, which somehow gives you a direct link to Diche. And most characters that worship Diche happen to be soul weavers. Minus Clarissa because she's a maniac. Moving on. Nuns are given rosaries, while knights are given oaths. Now, the term oath is used elsewhere. If we look into Iseria, her second skill is named Oathkeeper, which does a funny animation.
On my word. Oath of the White Flower.
Another mention of the word oath is used with Rowell's first skill, Key to an Oath. Another character is also Destina, who happens to be a Rowell face. Anyways, her first skill is also named Key to an Oath. According to Basque's artifact, we assume that oaths are just emblems. However, I don't think it's a coincidence that both Rowell and Destina have the same skill name, and I definitely don't think that it's a coincidence that Iseria also has the name Oathkeeper as her second skill. This implies that oaths might have another spiritual or magical meaning to it. Anyways, we're gonna get into that a little later. First, let's read Destina's background. Nicknamed the Beast of the Western Light, Destina is a master of light and metal who has physically manifested in the image of her deeply beloved soul weaver, Rowell. Wait a minute. Does that mean Spirit Lords can curry favor to a specific successor? The answer is yes. So in the case of Dominial, she's been labeled as the successor of Nixid, the Lord of Ice. She possesses more power than any of the Nixid followers. Dingo, surprisingly, is the successor of Malicus, the Lord of Fire, Malicus gave him a glove as a gift, which we see Blaze Dingo use. It looks pretty cool on Blaze Dingo, but regular Dingo, my man literally converted the glove into a portable oven. Damn, Malicus, you truly knew who to pick as your successor. All sarcasm aside, let's go back to Ruel. She's been selected to be Destina's successor, meaning that Ruel is both heir and successor to a Spirit Lord, which makes her kind of closer to Ross in terms of power levels, which would also explain why Ruel, bold-headed, tried to attack the Archdemon face on. It's because she is both successor and heir. Let's go back to a previous point that I mentioned. Ruel's first skill, Key to an Oath, and Izeria's second skill, Oath Keeper. I don't think it's a coincidence that Xeon, Ruel's guardian, selected Izeria as his heir. In fact, it makes total sense. It's never mentioned that Izeria might be the successor to a Spirit Lord. However, assuming that Izeria has access to maybe Ruel's Oath, which we already established, oaths are not something physical. They are something magical in this case. So anyways, it's possible that Izeria has the power of oaths, which no other character, except a Spirit Lord or a successor to a Spirit Lord, has been able to use. So that concludes my theory on why Xeon, Ruel's guardian, might have selected Izeria as his heir. Anyways, while we're on it, I guess I might as well explain why I knew this guardian was Heinen. Well, it's covered by dialogue early into episode 1. A lot of information. Good job making it this far. Anyways, we saw the end of the 6th world through the intro of the game where Judge Kisei and Ruel died. But here we have Strack Gauntlet. It says some dialogue about fighting off the Archdemon, said by Heir Aki, which could mean anything honestly. He could be the heir of the 1st world, 2nd world, 3rd, 4th, 5th, or even the 6th world, which I doubt that he's an heir in the 6th world. Otherwise we would have seen him in the intro, or at the very least, maybe Heinen would have been referenced. Who knows? Here we have Hilaglant, which says some dialogue before fighting off the Archdemon. I sincerely hope this character is the heir of Heinen, or something at the very least. I understand that not every character that fights the Archdemon is an heir. After all, in the 6th world, we saw Vildred fight off the Archdemon, yet he wasn't selected to be an heir. In similar respect to that theory, Basque too fought the Archdemon, or at least played a big role in that fight, yet he still wasn't an heir. Although it doesn't mention that this character is an heir, I really hope she is, because her design speaks to me, and I've been abusing this artifact on my T1. Anyways, moving on. Now this is just me criticizing the game really quick. There's this cutscene where Ross mistakes Sigret for Kisei. As we mentioned, the king of Terranor tried to revive his wife, blah blah blah, it's Sigret. Yeah, their designs do not look the same. Look at Kisei, look at Judge Kisei, and then look at Sigret. I mean, the molds are in the correct places, but the scythe, the powers, everything else, even the colors, even the pose, nothing is the same. Another cutscene happens in Dusselnork where you just see this random Ruel lookalike. Anyways, Ross sees Destina, mistakes her for Ruel, calls out her name, and chases after her. Of course, Destina says, No one but you could remember her name because, after every reset, the goddess wipes out everyone's memory, except Ross is a literal creation of a god, so his memories are intact. Anyways, I sincerely don't understand this whole look-alike situation, and it's pretty weird to me, because, I don't know, their designs just don't look the same. I mean, we should take a closer look, honestly. From my perspective, they don't share the same pose. It's obvious that their color palettes are completely different. Even their quote-unquote horn is different. And honestly, I do see the hair resemblance, but nothing else. Video's over. Anyways, I heard something interesting is in the journal. All this talk about lookalikes. Wait.
Sweet Mother of God. What the fuck?